Hello, everyone, and welcome to From Surviving to Thriving, where we don't just talk about all of the pretty aspects of business or life. We talk about the challenges, the mindset shifts, and all of the things in between. This space is absolutely not about having it all figured out, but it's about what happens in the middle. I'm your host. My name is Robin Carr. I'm an award-winning international keynote speaker and author and the founder of Thrive Unapologetically. And I'm so excited to have you all here with me today, as well as our guest, Peter Young. So Peter is a former sports broadcaster and is now an author of three Amazon bestsellers. So, Peter, I want to thank you so much for being here today. And to start us off, why don't you share a little bit about what inspired you to write these books and to make the transition from sports broadcasting to where you are now?
Well, Robin, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. As a sports broadcaster, what we do is we tell stories. So I am a storyteller trying my best to become a real writer. And so I had some great stories from when I played basketball and when I coached basketball and as a sports broadcaster. So I wanted to capture those stories, put them on paper. So that was kind of the genesis for my first two books, which are novels about faith and basketball. And while all of this is going on, I had unwittingly joined a tiny but destructive religious cult when I married the love of my life almost 30 years ago. And no one ever knowingly joins a cult. I didn't know I was in a cult. My wife brought to our marriage her beloved Uncle Robert, and over the years, he kind of took over our lives, destroyed my marriage, broke up my family. But the Lord rescued me, and I recovered, and so I wanted to share my story as a cautionary tale so other people wouldn't go through what I did. So that's why I then wrote the memoir and published that.
Wow, that is truly amazing. And I'm just grateful that number one, you got out of that situation, but number two, that you were brave enough to be able to share that story and to help other people. Because I feel like a lot of people read about those kinds of things or they hear about those things and they don't believe in them. Like they are like, oh, maybe that happened once upon a time, not in today's world. Um, for the naysayers out there, for the people who, don't believe that cults are real, like, can you give them, I don't know, just a little bit of advice or a little bit of like red flags or warnings, like, hey, you might be stepping into a cult if these things happen.
Sure, when most people, I think, when they hear about cults, if they read about them or watch a Netflix special, it's very abstract. It's nothing concrete or real because they don't have any experience with it. Like I didn't either. When I grew up, a cult was Jim Jones in Jonestown drinking the Kool-Aid or David Koresh, Heaven's Gate, stuff like that. And I had, no plans to ever join a cult, nor do I think anybody ever does. I don't think anybody knowingly joins a cult. It's always something different, something better. It's a self-help group. It's a new church, whatever it is. No one ever says, I'm going to join a cult. It's always something different. And also for your listeners to keep in mind, cults come in all different shapes and sizes. They can be big, they can be small, they can be physically or sexually abusive. Thankfully, mine was not. But they all share two common factors. That is, they all have a cult leader and they begin with undue manipulative mind control. So if you're under the mind control, you don't know that you are in a cult. And my story, I think, is very instructive because for many of these years, I was a sports broadcaster. I was on network TV. I was on ESPN, OLN, Versus, Fox, A&E, you name it. And all of this is going on in the background, and no one had any idea that my wife and I are being kind of swallowed up by this guy called Uncle Robert. He was our cult leader, and he wasn't related to any of us. And so, um, cult leaders kind of try and fly under the radar because they obviously don't want other people seeing what they're doing, because often what they are doing is it's very unhealthy and it's abusive. And cult leaders are abusive. In our case, was mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So when you peel back the onion quite a bit, all cult leaders share so many similarities, Robin. So red flags to look for are cult leaders very narcissistic. They hate being asked questions. The truth doesn't mind being questioned. They hate questions. They want blind obedience. They make all the rules, but the rules don't apply to them. They have a grandiose sense of self. Uncle Robert, claimed that he had personal relationships with congressmen and senators. He wrote a letter to Saddam Hussein before Gulf War number two, and if only Saddam had listened to Uncle Robert, he could have avoided Gulf War number two. Stuff like that. And then they also try and blur the lines or destroy the nuclear family. So, like in our case, again, our cult was very small, but it would have been my former in-laws, my wife and I, and my kids, and a few other adults. But all of us in that family were all like little children to the cult leader. So there is no, grandfather, father, and grandson. We're all like little kids. And so all authority has been given to the cult leader, which is it's unbiblical and it's wicked.
Wow. I really appreciate you sharing all of that insight because I didn't know a lot of that. I've studied a little bit, and I don't know if you've ever seen the show The Following, but that was the first, I guess, introduction that I had to kind of that world. Um, so thank you so much. And so let's talk about your journey a little bit. So you go from sports broadcasting, you write your faith and basketball um, books, and then you transition into I'm going to write this one about the cult and about my experience. So, I mean, were you scared? Like, is this a situation where, Uncle Robert could like after the math, like have some vendetta against you? Like, I don't know how any of that works. So I'm genuinely
Sure.
curious, when
Sure.
you published this book, kind of what was your emotions? What was your mindset? Like, were you fearful? Were you excited? Were you just like, I need to help people? Where were you at mentally with all of that?
So it happened during COVID, really. So let me rewind a little bit. So I was married for about 20 years, faithful. I loved my wife. I never wanted a divorce. I thought we would never get divorced. I thought we had the greatest marriage ever for the first few years. And she was devoted and revered Uncle Robert. So she believed everything he said. And
Mm,
I was always very questioning. 16, 17 years into our marriage, I finally became brainwashed. I really let my guard down. I kind of got worn out. I was the proverbial frog in the pot of hot water, right? That turned to a boil. So I never got out in time. So I was legitimately brainwashed. So then when she left me, I was devastated. And then she and Uncle Robert started to teach our children that I was the devil, that I was Satan, and a sorcerer, and a bloodline, and a liar, because I was a fraud. I was never a true Christian. So she had taken the three youngest children with her and moved in with her parents in northern Idaho. I lived in Montana. And I was a wreck. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I was never suicidal. I'd lost 30 pounds. And I hadn't told anybody in my neighborhood, in my community, or my family. So my parents, my brothers and sister-in-laws, aunts and uncles and cousins who had no idea this was going on. I didn't share it with them until finally 3 months after my wife left and took our three youngest kids. I reached out and told people what was going on. So then she filed for divorce. We got a guardian ad litem involved. If you don't know what that is, it's a person appointed by the court to look after the best interests of the children in a high conflict divorce. And she saw it right away. She saw cult influence from Uncle Robert and the worst case of parental alienation she'd ever seen, where one parent tries to alienate the kids from the other. When the mom calls dad the devil, that's pretty bad.
yeah.
So the court sent the three kids back to me. I mean, their mother was not in jail. She was not a drug addict or anything else. They took the kids from her, sent them back to me because it was so obvious the mental and emotional and spiritual abuse was going on. So now the three kids that live with me, I'm a single dad, just trying to survive each and every day. And now COVID hits. And I'm trying to kind of piece together the puzzle pieces of what happened to my life. And so writing the memoir was unbelievably therapeutic and cathartic. I could not move my fingers fast enough as I'm typing on my laptop computer because for when it first happened and for the next few months, I thought it was all my fault because again, I'm still brainwashed. My
Mhm.
wife was perfect. Uncle Robert was perfect because he taught he only sinned once in his life. And he taught that, Paige, I call her Paige in my book, that she's the perfect mom, she's the perfect wife. It's all my fault. And then I slowly realized, well, no, it's this little narcissistic cult wannabe leader that's doing things that are wicked and unbiblical that destroyed my marriage and broke up my family. So as I wrote it all out, it helped to really put it on paper and see the progression of how it started even before I met my future wife back in 1996. It's a fascinating story. And then I sat on it though, Robin, to kind of dive further into your question. I didn't publish it for about 2, 3 years. I wrote it, and it was 99% done, And then I thought, do I share this with the public? Should I share it? And I sent it to friends and relatives, and they said, yes, you should really put this out there. So I did.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, truthfully, that is amazing. And it really hones into I don't know if you've listened to any of these episodes previous to this one. But I am a firm believer in journaling and that you really can discover a lot about yourself when you just let your feelings flow, and just let it all out on paper. And sometimes when you go back and you read the things that you just wrote, it's kind of surprising. And it sounds like that was true for you too. Like you wrote what you were feeling, you wrote what you experienced, but you didn't have the cognizant thought yet of, oh my gosh, I was in a cult. Um, that's amazing. So now your children are still with you and they are happy, healthy, or like, do they know about their mom? I'm just curious, like, are
Sure.
they, how old are your children? Are they ch little or where? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. The oldest two are in their mid 20s. They're college graduates. They're on their own. The youngest three, so the youngest would be, mid teenage years. So the youngest three lived with me for several years. Their mom had supervised visits for a long time. I tried my best to never, badmouth their mom. I didn't want to do what, she did to me. And really, despite all the horrible things that she had said and done towards me, she's a victim just like I was. She
Hmm.
grew up in this cult. Uncle Robert is not related to any of us. He was born and raised in Syria, met Paige's parents, my former in-laws, at a tiny seminary in the early 70s before Paige was even born. So she grew up in this world. So again, she's a victim of all this. She still doesn't see it. She thinks I'm a liar. She thinks my book is, utter nonsense, unfortunately. And I was hoping, the Lord would open her eyes and ears to the truth. And so the children all love their mom as they should. I wrote the book partially so that they would read it and so they would hear my side of the story because they really mostly only heard the side of their mother, Uncle Robert and their grandparents. And
Hmm.
so it's kind of a mixed bag with, some of the children don't speak to me very much, others do. But parenting is a marathon, not a sprint. And, I will always be their dad no matter what happens. And I'll always be there for them. And hopefully one day, and I continue to pray for them every day, that we will have a healthy, uh, you know, Christ honoring relationship.
Yeah, gosh, that has to be so hard. And your spirit is so strong. Like the fact that you can just continue to do that, and I'm sure that's painful for you. But it just says a lot about you and a lot about your character, and even more, about the book and that you wanted them to be able to read it. Like you weren't trying to hide what had happened, and the fact that you don't speak badly of their mother and you do understand that she's a victim too. So powerful. There's so much power in everything that you just said. That
Yeah.
does lead me to another question though. So what is the goal? Like if someone reads this book, other than, or any of your books, I'm hyper focused on this one, but I do understand that you have three. What is the intention? So if someone is to buy this book from Amazon and, what are you hoping that they gain from it? Is it strictly awareness? Is it just your story and getting it out there? Or kind of walk me through that a little bit. What's the goal of the books?
Sure. So the memoir is called Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. I know that sounds like an odd title, and it's a fascinating story that goes all the way back to a dream I believe the Lord gave at the time, my future wife, before she met me. It is an absolutely fascinating story. And that dream was turned on its head by Uncle Robert to solidify his control over Paige, even again before we got married. It is a bizarre and very intense story. I love reading books where you can't put them down. At the end of the chapter, it's like 2 a.m., you should be going to sleep. You just can't stop, right? Those are the kind of books I love to read, and that's the kind of book that I wrote. So, just forewarned, you pick it up, you will not put it down. It's very intense. It's all true. I quote numerous emails and letters and books. So, over 10% of it is, actual quotations. And it's a fascinating story, so I think you'll enjoy it. But also, there are three lessons, primary lessons for the reader. Number one is that a strong marriage has to have Christ in the center. We don't go Robert in between us, between Paige and I. So parents and children and pastors, they can all help a Christian marriage, but from the outside, in between needs to be Christ. No wonder our marriage failed. Number two, you need to have strong Christian fellowship. And I don't care if that means Bible study or bowling league, right? Get together with other people, other believers, have a strong network of friends, because in the Christian faith, we talk about the body of Christ. Okay, so if I cut off my thumb, I'm not going to die. My thumb will die, but I won't. Well, that's like what we were. And that's what people in cults are. They get isolated and cut off from other people. Cult leaders do that on purpose, and that happened to us. So I only had this one voice I was listening to, and it was this little narcissistic madman. So fellowship and community is very important. And then number three, salvation comes before sanctification. You can't
Mm,
switch the order. And anyone who tries to tell you you need to switch the order is trying to act as a gatekeeper to God, which is another trait of cult leaders. So we were born again, and then you learn to crawl, walk, and run. Well, you can't learn to run in the womb, right? So that's the analogy. You're born again, you're saved, and then sanctification. So how that plays out in the cult is the cult leader will convince you that you need to do certain things or learn certain things from him before you are ready to be saved. In other words, you need his approval before you
mm.
can be saved. And it's just wicked and unbiblical. So those are the main lessons.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that they are all faith-based, and it's amazing that you went, from one extreme to the other. And it's just beautiful. Like your whole story is just, I have goosebumps right now. Um, so that is truly amazing. And that you are able to, dive so deep into your faith to help other people. Do you ever like share your story and like from a speaking standpoint, or like do you go to like youth groups, or is it all just written at this point?
So as a storyteller, I do it verbally or in writing. I do a lot of podcasts. I continue to write, so I got a fourth book coming out later this year. I have spoken at my church, and I do speak publicly. I did notice that you're a keynote speaker. I love getting up on stage. As a former sports broadcaster, it kind of scratches the itch of getting up and speaking publicly. There's something about sharing your testimony or really anything in a live setting. You kind of rise to the occasion. There's a certain adrenaline rush with that. And I feel like it's not just, hey, look at me, I'm a public speaker. It's, listen, I've got an important story to share. This is not about my ego. I am sharing how I royally and colossally screwed up my life. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that hit rock bottom. I was dragged on rock bottom and I was bouncing on rock bottom. But I share that story so that other people don't have to go through what I went through. So yeah, I love to share the story, publicly on podcasts and in person.
Awesome. No, I'm right there with you. Everybody used to think that I wanted to be a keynote speaker because I just wanted to be on the stage and to have all the attention. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's exactly what you just said. Like, I want to share my story so that other people don't have to go through what I went through, and they don't have to do it alone. Um, I can only imagine that you are so powerful in churches, especially like if you were to talk to youth and kind of give them that precautionary as they're going through, different things in their life. Um, have you ever thought about having your own podcast or creating your own stage and like having your own event and being like, hey, here, here it is. Let's and, like who's your audience?
Yeah, a lot of great questions. I haven't thought about doing my own podcast. I'm stretched so thin as it is. I'm still a single dad. I sell real estate to pay the bills, and the goal and the dream is to make a full-time living as a writer because I truly love sharing a good story. I'm like anybody else. I love to read a good story. I love to sit down and watch a movie that tells me a good story. I love to sit on Sunday, in the pew, and if my pastor tells a really good story from the Bible, I'm riveted, right? But I don't have time for my own podcast, so I love coming on podcasts like yours. And I have thought about ways to get out on the stage more often, just haven't been able to figure that out. But I would love to do more of that because, again, I feel like there is a lot out there about cults. You talked about the show you watched. I know there's stuff on Netflix. I've now read a number of books on cults. I find it fascinating simply because of what I went through. But a lot of them really come from the vantage point of, well, this is what it did to me, and I've been so wounded by it. And the last thing they're going to do is relying on their Christian faith. It's almost like they've been so wounded by it, the authors kind of reject any kind of faith, really. Where I'm
Mhm.
coming from the exact opposite direction. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be alive without the Lord protecting me and rescuing me from what I went through. And to me, that's an important message to share.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. And I love that you are on that side. Because I think it would be easy to not be on that side. I think it would be way easier than the journey that you've expressed that you've been through. So we are almost at time, but just very quickly. So for anyone who is either interested in you as a human, they want to get to know you, talk to you, or they want to get your books, how do they get in touch with you and, where are those links and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So you can find all of my books on Amazon or Barnes& and Noble or other major online retailers. So again, the memoir Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. And then the two novels are The Blue Team and Wardrobe of the Wolf. And again, those are a series. The third book in that series will come out later this year. And then you can always go to my website. It's authorpeteryoung.com. It's got links to, buy all my books. It's got snippets of me speaking publicly and my podcast. And you can reach out to me. I do have a monthly newsletter. I'm like you and everybody else, Robin. I don't want to get bombarded with a bunch of emails every day. And so I don't do that to, people that are on my newsletter list. If I don't have anything to share, I don't. But I've got a lot of really good stories, and my stories all have a message to them. So if you want to hear those, just go to my website and sign up. It's for free.
Awesome. Well, Peter, thank you so much. This has been incredibly insightful, and I am honored to have you here and to hear just a little piece of your story today. And for
Thank
everybody else who's listening, if you're in the middle right now, I want you to know this. You're not behind, you are becoming. And that is what thriving really looks like. Bye, y'all.